Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. We are just a minute past the hour here. We're going to get started in a couple minutes. I still see some people funneling through. Hopefully, you've come to the right webinar on Don't Get Left Behind. The future of pharma belongs to digital learning innovations. I'm Nolan Hout, the host of this session. We'll get started here in just another minute or two as we have people filling in. Thank you for joining early. I appreciate that. Please hold on for just another minute as we get some last people to come through. And I'm silencing my phone. The first rule of any podcast and movie. We should play an ad at the beginning about it.
Okay, I've given everyone a heart attack and no one back. Excellent. Nolan, I think I missed the punchline. Are you advancing the slides?
Yep. All right,
Okay,
so we've got people coming in, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining the webinar today. Appreciate you spending some time with us. We're slotted for the hour. If we went early, then I guess it's a win for most here. I'm Nolan Hout, the host, and joining me today we have Sarah Moore and Jennifer Goldsack from Digital Medicine Society. This is a company that we Infopro Learning had came to know about recently and looking to partner with. They drive a ton of digital innovation in the medical space, and that being a primary focus of ours at Infopro Learning, we felt like there was such an alignment between the two of us and helping the greater industry just understand what's on the radar. And this is a perfect time to do so. At the end of a year, starting of the next year, we're always wanting to know what's coming up. So we'll talk about some of those today with Sarah and Jennifer talking, on a larger industry. I'll cover some of the points, very specific on the learning side as well. For those that are not familiar with GoToWebinar, the engagement is limited to questions. You'll see that in the panel off to the right. There's a questions tab. If you want to put anything in there, you're welcome to, whether it's a question or a comment or anything you want addressed. Please feel free to use that to your disposal. We'll answer the questions along the way, so don't feel like you have to wait to the end. The other thing to keep in mind is that we are recording the session as well, so you don't need to take fervent notes. We will be sending this to you afterwards, which is always the number one question. So yes, we will be recording it. You will be getting it. It usually takes us 2 to 3 days to produce it, so look for that toward the ends of next week. All right, though, enough of the background. Well, I guess I shouldn't say enough. I have one more background slide, and then we'll get into it, just a little bit about who we are. If you haven't heard of Infopro Learning, we're a full service learning and development organization, really covering anything in the digital or in the learning experience world. If it has to do with unlocking the potential of your people or transforming the performance of your organization through your talent, that's our core focus. And again, medical healthcare pharma is a huge industry for us, a lot of case studies and experiences, which is why we wanted to make this webinar just for our clients and our potential clients in that area. So with that, now we will kick off the webinar and hand it over to Digital Medicine Society and Sarah.
Oops, Jen, you're on mute. Sarah, do you want to go back and introduce yourself, and then I can introduce time? Sure, I'm happy to go ahead. Jen, you're cutting in and out just a little bit, just to let you know. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Moore. I'm the education lead here at Dime, working on building out our educational offerings, our portfolio for both enterprise license offerings, so things that we're selling on a corporate level that you would buy for your entire organization, and on an individual level, so our individual offerings that will be coming in 2023. Jen and I are excited to be here today and talk to you all about our education program. Welcome. Fantastic, Sarah, thank you so much. And it's just, give a couple of tips that should allow me to allow a couple of me better connected. So hopefully you can hear me now. So hi everyone,
Jennifer, we're still having an issue hearing you. Maybe you can try turning your video off. Maybe we can
Yeah,
conserve a little bit of bandwidth.
How's that? Any better?
It sounds better so far. But now we're not able to hear you at all. If you'd like, you can join in through the phone as well, like a actual, landline, if that helps. Thanks everyone for sticking with us. I guess it's not a webinar unless you face some challenge. So if those on the bingo card, we've already had the you're on mute and an audio issue. So let's hope we don't cover the rest of the classic ones. But thank you for sticking with us here as we sort through the audio issue. Well, we see you again now, Jennifer.
Nolan, while Jen gets logged back in, I'm happy to sort of run through some of our earlier information here, and then she can sort of jump
Yeah,
in and take over when
yeah,
she
let's
gets
do that.
back on.
Great.
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about sort of where the development and the idea for this course came up, that we're going to be talking about today. And a lot of this comes out of our deep relationships with pharma companies and trying to understand some of their pain points and their problems. So as you can see here on the slide, it takes a long time to bring a new drug to market. Only one in five trials is terminated, and we don't really know why. And there's just low rates of technical success. So all of these things that we were sort of hearing from our partner companies across the industry, always trying to think about sort of where the needs are, and how we can best fit into those needs within the capabilities that we have here at Dime, sort of led us to thinking more about formal education around digital and how digital can be used in the pharma industry in a more holistic way than it is being used now. Nolan, do you want to go to the next slide?
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. Um, so here at Dime, we're thinking about a number of digital solutions across the ecosystem, for both pharma and non-pharma companies, though today we're going to be talking pretty much exclusively about pharma. So at Dime, digital measures are sort of our bread and butter. One of our major flagship projects was the playbook for digital clinical measures. So really walking folks through how to use these tools to collect sensor-based information. But you can see here on the left that there's a list of these digital solutions. So non-clinical digital measures, so things like smart pill caps that are used for adherence measures, AI ML methodologies, real-world data and evidence, digital companion apps. So you might bring a drug to market and have it with a digital companion app that might be used for I'm seeing Jen's back on. Let's see if she can get on her audio. Before I turn that over, I'm happy to continue with this slide. E-consent, so how can we use e-consent to deploy within pharma companies and for trials specifically to decentralize those. Telehealth and virtual health, so we're seeing major trends across this industry coming out of the pandemic, where we really moved a lot of healthcare to telehealth whenever possible, and trying to figure out how we use that sustainably in trials. And then social media and digital marketing. So how are we using these tools to recruit patients? So these are some of the tools that we are seeing folks start to use, and really trying to codify how we can help folks use those, and understand that they're not scary, they're not here to take anybody's job, but how can we get folks comfortable with the idea of using them and start to understand some of the benefits that they may have for them.
So Sarah, that's a interesting, thing you bring up is, everybody is scared of what's new. And, I think historically, and some of these are not just like new, they're kind of changing the way that things have been done.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you find how much of when we're talking about, when we've got a learning and development professionals on this call, it sounds like a big part of it is just kind of seeding that why, before you get deep into, okay, let us show you how to do telehealth, let us tell you why
Mm-hmm.
you should
Mm-hmm.
use telehealth. Was that right? Is that kind of what you feel is the first goal, is to bring people on board with why it's important and why it will help and make a better patient or customer or product experience?
Yeah, exactly. And start to sort of understand some of those benefits that it may offer them. I think that when we think about sort of personas for learning and incorporating digital, we have sort of at one end of the spectrum, someone who's like, I want to use a Fitbit in my study, or I want to, use this tool. And at the other end of the spectrum, we have folks that are really reticent or even scared about, what are these new things doing? And I think that we're trying to sort of bring both ends of the spectrum into that sort of center point to say, let's think about what digital solutions are fit for purpose within what you're doing. It might be a Fitbit, but it might not be. And on the other end of the spectrum to say, hey, let's understand some of the benefits these have here and how you might use these, and how you might feel comfortable using these. And so you can just see here, on the left, this sort of list going down, and then across the top, these columns are all the different ways that these tools might be used at different stages. And so trying to help folks understand in the context of their role and in their, teams, projects, et cetera, really trying to think about fit for purpose and what makes sense. And we here at Dime believe that there is an education component around that, and getting folks comfortable with words that they may have heard in passing, but really don't know how to engage on, so
Correct.
that people can have up-level conversations across their organizations.
Wonderful. And Jennifer, I see you're back in. You're on mute, but let's see if this is a better audio experience.
I hope
There you
so.
are,
How's
Jen.
that?
That's good.
Better.
Well, I mean, I feel like any presentation touting technology isn't complete without some technology snafu. So I've managed to download the app and get myself in all during this period of time. So apologies, everyone, for the disruption. But Sarah, Nolan, I appreciate you driving forward. And Sarah, and in fact, Nolan, if you want to hop back to that slide, because I think Sarah drew out some really,
Sure.
I think, important nuances on the previous slide here. Sarah, when you said, it's not just about sort of learning the words, although that's critically important. And, Nolan, Sarah and I talk a lot with our partners who already have teams in here. You look at something like AI, ML, right? We've been talking in our daily lives, in the press and these sorts of things about artificial intelligence for years. But how many people have a deep understanding of what that actually means and how it could help them in their job? And so the way that Sarah and her team construct this course is, it's not just what are the terms, it's not just what does good look like, what does safe look like, what does trustworthy look like, but there's some change management in there as well. What are these tools? What can they do to support your existing KPIs in your day-to-day work? How can we give you the skills to actually deploy these to help you reach the goals you already have? These tools aren't here to make your job harder, and they're not here to steal your job either. They're here to help you. And that's a really important subtext that the course has running through it. And I think it's critically important at this juncture to do that change management hand in hand with the upskilling.
Yeah, and it to me it seems like it's one of those things, and that's why I really liked partnering with you on this, is you had so much of this content and so much of this already built out. Is, it's like when they say, when is the best time to plant a tree? And they're like, well, 10 years ago. Well, when is the second best time? Tomorrow. And it's like, these things are coming. These things are there, whether you have it now or you're going to have it. Laying that foundation now is a great idea. Love to hear you.
And Nolan, I completely agree. And you've actually teed us up really nicely for the story and I that Sarah want to tell a little bit in the following slides. So if you skip forward to the next one, we are going to tell a little bit of a story here. And if you look down at the bottom right-hand corner, you can see that this is dated October 2019. So what we're going to do is actually shine a little bit of a light on what has been the journey of the digitization of clinical trials. And so what you can see here is in October 2019, which of course was the before times, there were globally, and this is global data, there were 12 sponsors, so 12 different life sciences companies who were using digital endpoints, so sensor-based tools, to generate information about the safety and effectiveness or efficacy of their products. And you can see that about half of those were positioned in phase 2 or phase 3 trials, and our pharma colleagues on the line will know that that are our sort of high stakes pivotal trials, and that these endpoints, while there were 34 of them, and that was pretty exciting for October 2019, they were being used across drug development, device development, biologic development, and then some others, which are like gene therapies and other sorts of products. So that was pretty exciting in October 2019. But Nolan, if you switch to the next slide, we can see this sort of exponential growth in the use of these tools. So we update this library of endpoints that we maintain at Dime once a quarter. And so at the beginning of October, the last time we updated this, we went from 12 sponsors globally to 101 sponsors globally who are using these digital endpoints to answer questions about the performance of their new medical products. And if you go across, Nolan, to the next slide, it's not just that we've gone from 12 to 101 sponsors, it's that the number of digital endpoints being used has gone from 34 to 366, so increased by an order of magnitude. And then if you look on the left-hand side, we went from 50% of the endpoints being used in what we would describe as pivotal trials to 75%. That means the stakes have gone up. So it's not just, as Sarah would have given voice to, the challenges of the market right now. And it's not just those new digital tools in the toolbox. We're seeing active increase in the use of these tools. And the question is the upskilling of the field keeping pace? Is the support that institutions are giving their teams, and not just the people on the front lines of the digitization, but the support functions, right? Legal, procurement, and then downstream and into the market, the post-market teams, health economics, the commercial teams, the marketing teams, are they keeping pace? Do they know what this data means? Can they tell stories? Do they understand? Do they trust these data? Is are institutions investing in making sure that that workforce is skilled enough for this rapid increase? And if you jump to the next slide, I just want to show a couple of other data points, and then let's actually dive in and discuss some of these questions. It's not just that industry is moving, it's the whole landscape is changing. We can see that our FDA colleagues launched guidance on the use of technologies in almost exactly a year ago now. And if you skip to the next slide, we can see that colleagues in Europe have done exactly the same thing. So it's the global market is trending in this direction. So your global teams need to be upskilled. We know that consumer expectations are driving the use of these digital tools. If you want to recruit patients to your clinical trials, you better make sure you're meeting consumer expectations. And if you go to the next slide, which will be our final slide, and then let's dive into some of these questions, we also know what we can see here on this slide is the use of remote monitoring, so the use of sensor tools in routine healthcare. It's increased nearly 2,000% in 2 years. The clinical trials environment lives within the healthcare environment, and this is the kind of massive uptick that we're seeing. So there's really no getting away from it. There's industry progress, the regulators are leading and driving here, and the external environment, consumer expectations, patient expectations, and clinical care are all driving in this direction. And so, what Sarah and I sort of hope to discuss with you today, Nolan, before Sarah dives in and talks specifically how the course addresses this rapidly changing landscape is the investment being made? Is there enough intentionality about really preparing the workforce for this new environment?
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to do. We haven't done one, but I would be interested to survey pharma companies and any of these healthcare companies and asks that question, do you feel you're investing enough in the training of these programs? And for those on the call, if you want to, in the questions tab, you can either write like a yes or a no, and we should have made that a poll question. And I was just thinking about that because I have a friend who is, and we had him on a podcast, talk about launching patient care in a remote town in Idaho. And he is in charge of setting up the digital patient experience. And I had asked him, what training do you have now? And he's like, what's training? He's like, the patient demands have changed, and we responded to the change. With COVID and the whole world kind of going remote, we responded to that change with these digital methods. But now that is the new normal. That is the expectation, is that is how you do it. If you were able to get a cold test or a flu test at your house and then get medicine prescribed to you digitally, it doesn't feel as nice when you have to go into a waiting room for an hour with other sick people anymore. So it is a really interesting idea, and I wonder what that would be.
And I think you really get into topics that are really important, which is the pandemic drove adoption. And kudos to all of our sort of clinical care providers, our research colleagues who turned on a dime in order to be responsive to the needs of their patients and to have continuity of care and to not terminate clinical trials, right? People who may have been on new chemotherapy product trials, how do we keep them in that trial, right? That potentially life-saving drug, how do we make sure that we keep the integrity of the trial? I mean, unbelievable hard work went into making that pivot. And we learned that patients and participants prefer this approach, not always, but in many cases, right? And so, now as we sort of hopefully transition out of the pandemic, there are new challenges, right? We have sort of clinical staffing shortages. And I think it's absolutely imperative that we're actually providing the support to the folks we're asking to drive this change, to position them for success. You can't just, impose a digital strategy on a clinical company and expect success and expect a satisfied and engaged work and sort of, high experience workforce if you're not actually doing the training. And Sarah, I'd love to tap you in and talk a little bit about why we made the decision to build the pharma course that we offer right now at an enterprise level rather than just for particular subgroups of the team.
Yeah, I think that in some of our early conversations with partners around trying to understand what it is that they need and exploring options on our side around, okay, do we want to have this course and really manage, per seat basis, or how do we want to do this? I think that what we heard sort of over and over again is like, I need everybody in my organization to take this course. It's no longer just sort of my digital centered teams and sort of those who are directly on their periphery, but like really even when I'm interacting with legal or procurement, that I need them to know something about this too. And so we decided to develop and sell this course as an enterprise course so that when folks purchase this, they're purchasing it for their entire organization. So they're buying a license that allows them to roll this out broadly within their organization. They don't need to think about, okay, I only have 50 seats in this course, who needs it the most? They can really blast it out to everyone and say, hey, this is an org-wide priority here. And really that's part of the value, right? Is that you're then able to bring folks from different functions, different teams, and there is some common language and understanding across. And it's not that, oh, Joe over here has taken the course, but Sally hasn't. And so they're still sort of talking across each other on this stuff. It's that even if they work in very different functions, when they say, digital clinical measures, they each know something about what that means and what we're talking about, and maybe an example of where folks are already doing that in the field. And this is something I think that in our conversations with partners has been really effective for them, is not having to do the work of thinking about who needs this the most, that they really can, put this on their LMS system broadly, both assigned for folks saying like, hey, we really think you need this, but also leaving it up there as optional. So if folks are sort of browsing their LMS system, say, hey, I'm interested in this, and yeah, choose one of the options to take there.
Yeah, I think I think that kind of speaks to a lot of what we were talking about. It is, I think fundamentally we have like a knee-jerk reaction that when something new comes out, that we want to really dig into the specifics of, let's train them how to click this button. You know, let's get them to know how to use the nail, or the hammer, I should say, to hit this nail. When really, to see more long-term buy-in for these types of programs, it does take more of a universal understanding of what this is, why this is needed, and again, how this impacts you, right? How does the finance head, or the marketing head for that matter? I mean, for marketing, as a marketer myself, I can say, heck, this is awesome for me. I can start touting that we're the best in this, we're innovative, or whatever. But knowing why that even matters, right? Knowing why capturing data makes us a better company than those that aren't, and how business intelligence is being leveraged for that. And so I really, that's what I really found great about some of the offerings that you provide, was just that fundamental, here's what you need to know to start that conversation. And so I would love to learn from you, when you've had people take these courses, I think you've had some in there. What is some of the feedback that you get after you're able to bring people up to speed? Have you gotten some testimonials, or just some anecdotes as far as organizations who have invested in educating their entire company on these programs?
Sarah, maybe I'll take a first
Yeah.
cut here, and then you can go behind me. But one of the most interesting things that we've learned, Nolan, is how good the org-wide education has been for the innovation teams, because they have made such enormous progress over the last few years, driven in some cases by the pandemic. But and Pharma's brought in brilliant data scientists, brilliant sort of tech people with real vision, who have great tools that they want to deploy to fundamentally transform for the better the way that we sort of develop, and the pace at which we can bring effective and safe new drugs to market and to the patients that need them. But the pool of talent that's out there, every single industry is clamoring to get data scientists and high quality, high ethical tech people. There's a lot of competition for those experts. And what they've been really excited about, the handful of companies that have already rolled out all the way across the organization, is the level of satisfaction that those innovation teams have had. Every time they want to try something, it's no longer their job. They don't have to go and innovate with like legal to get a contract with an AI company through, right, in order to do something. They no longer have to sort of educate procurement. They don't have to go to med affairs, reg affairs, the ClinOps teams, and just sort of take all of the time to win hearts and minds and bring them with them, because that work has been done. So it's helping their retention and it's helping their recruitment. And I think that's a really interesting reflection on how this investment, something that should increase the skills, the capacity, the capability of your entire enterprise, is actually fueling the tip of the spear for innovation.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really think of the, of something as small as going through procurement. Why do I need to invest in this if they have no idea what it is? That's big, I know, for a lot of people on the call today, as they're looking to seek budgets and set their budgets for next year. That's going to be big. Is how do I win the hearts and minds of people by giving them some context around what it is I'm presenting?
100%. And we know, there's two drivers in everything, right? And I think you feel this particularly keenly in pharma, which is, it's not just what does it cost, it's also timelines, right? Because we need to get these therapies, to the patients first and foremost who need them more quickly, but also delays in time to market means delays to revenue. And so if at every juncture, every time you try and innovate, yet the handbrake goes on and you have to stop and educate people about what good looks like and what is it that we're actually doing here and what's the purpose and what's the value and how does this fit into the protocol and to our workflows. If you can obviate some of that, massive impact on timeline. Sarah, I don't know if there's anything more specific about particular modules or courses, because I know that we do capture some really lovely feedback from our learners.
Yeah, Jen, I think what you said was sort of the first thing that came to mind for me as well. I think that the other thing I've heard, from our learners and partners so far is that besides, sort of the initial taking of the course and sort of any knowledge or information that they internalize there, that this then becomes a resource for learners to tap back to for some just-in-time information. So for example, if they're working through a process with their regulatory colleagues, to go back to our regulatory lesson to sort of give them a refresher on what it is that they learned there, and that then becomes as much a first time taking the course and everything that you learn and are exposed to, something that they're able to reach back to and say, hey, I remember I learned something about regulatory processes in that course. Now I'm doing the work. What is that? Let me refresh myself, and sort of again go into that next conversation with their colleague, sort of up leveled, just refreshing themselves on that content.
Yeah, that is so good. What happens after I learn it the first time? Because that's, if it's anybody like me, it takes me the third or fourth time to learn it. Getting access to that is very key. So, and I know we talked on, some of these as well, some of the most pressing concerns and kind of how education helps that. I think we've probably covered each of the, we just talked about access to talent pool, innovation and fast evolution, right? I mean, and that's where I said is whether you're part of the innovation or you're about to, if you haven't set a foundation now, it's just going to be slowly moving people there. So lots of benefits there. Anything else, Sarah, Jennifer, you wanted to add on this?
I think there is one point that I think is really sort of critical, and it gets to all of these issues, but it's a fundamentally different time to run a workforce than it was several years ago. We have to work really hard to retain good talent, and I think that one of the things that Sarah and the team put into our course was the language, right? First of all, can we remove some of that fear, uncertainty, and doubt around tech terms? But also, can we make it easier for members of the same team to actually communicate with one another and work together? And it's been, I think, fascinating to see that happen in practice, to sort of see a new lingua franca emerging, because that's great for satisfaction. That, in the workplace, it's not just the cold skills, right? But if one team can't talk to another team, where are you in terms of trust? How can you access that global talent pool, right? These are the sorts of things that have been such fascinating, I think, positive externalities of the core problem that we've been trying to solve for, and pretty excited about the impact that this can have on the pharma industry more broadly.
And I have a question coming in. I'm not sure if you want to take it or not, but there's some questions about price of, how do you go about pricing? And I think you mentioned, some of the licensing for some of that content was more org based versus, seat based. If people have those questions, where's the best place to go? Contacting you directly? What's the best source to direct them to?
Yes, absolutely. They should contact us directly. And I'm going to go ahead and say contact@dimesociety.org is where folks can get us. Put education in the subject line, and that will make its way through to the education team, and we'll try and respond within a couple of business days. I think the other way that folks can get it, if they happen to be on the website, and for folks who are watching the recording of this, it's actually embedded in the last slide. You can go to the Dime website, go to our access to education area, and there's a form there that you can fill in for more information, and we'll get back to you almost immediately. But I think it's really important to remember that we're a non-profit and a mission-driven org, so we are pretty close to cost in terms of some of the pricing, and also it's a tiered cost at the enterprise level. So it's all based on sort of revenue, and it's intended to be as accessible and affordable to everyone as possible. Oh,
Yeah,
great! And I see someone's dropped that email into the chat there, so
yeah,
thank you.
and I can speak to that as well. When I started hearing of the pricing, compared to what many of us are probably used to spending at, Open Sesame, LinkedIn Learning, things like that, it's quite reasonable. So I encourage you to do that. So thank you so much for that. And what I wanted to talk about for a little bit, I know a lot of this was trying to educate on the changes in pharma that are coming categorically and how that's driving some innovation, but there's also some changes in digital learning, that are big, and how people learn. And I think obviously your course, represents a lot of these, but outside of just bringing that, here's some of the things, and we wanted to present some of the lessons that we've learned from our clients and things that they're interested in, things that they're starting to press forward. And I think, first and foremost, we're seeing a lot of a need for personalization, and it doesn't necessarily have to be, a lot of times people think, well, how do you personalize for something that's so global? A lot of the times it's just, what's in it for me is needed. So, if we take a look at even a course like Dime has been talking about, that is general, right? It's for the greater good. It's for most of the organization. Creating a simple infographic, a paragraph, a single slide on a PowerPoint deck that gets shown first and foremost to your entire learning audience, that just says, hey, you're all going to be getting access to this course in the marketing department. Here's why it's important for you. So it doesn't require, I think a lot of times we think of, well, maybe it has to use technology and know that the person's in marketing. And so since we know they're in marketing, it's going to change these words. Yeah, that is great. But a lot of times it can be something as simple as that. If you have, 3 hours of content that's sitting behind, and it's meant for the entire organization, and it's not really worth the investment in personalizing that for everybody. Again, really small ways, make an introduction and an exit event as part of that experience. That's becoming really, really important as we get to the what's in it for me becoming super important in learning. And standardizing approach, is so key. I don't know if this will ever be a trend that goes away. There's this ebb and flow of centralized learning in pharma, decentralized learning, some type of hybrid. But what we're seeing more and more is whichever format that it's going with, whether it's centralized, decentralized, trying to find a way to create a systematic approach for how we want to design our training programs, so that not everybody is having to reinvent the wheel, especially those on the call that maybe are in a leadership position within L&D. Really, we're seeing much more of an interest from a CLO, VP kind of level than we have before, about saying we want to start creating these assets and these templates to level up the entire organization. And the third point here, analytics to track progress. Dime was just talking about how that's big in pharma. Well, it's obviously big for us as well. And that's a big benefit of what Dime does, it being a digital solution, being able to track and identify how people are learning, how people are engaging. But there's also a lot of data and access that we have today that we didn't before, leveraging things like learning experience portals and LRS, learning record stores, things of that nature. We are getting more and more data. I think really where the trend that we're and what we're driving a lot of our audience to is more on how are you going to leverage that data I think there was almost a gold rush when it came to data, where people said, I really need data, but I guess I don't really know what I'm going to do with it. I think one of the biggest things we advise a lot of our pharma clients on is, what decisions do you need to make with this? And that's the data that you really need. So don't collect data just to, just as a hoarder, if you would. Have some intent behind that.
Yeah,
And
Nolan,
then,
oh, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I'd love to
yeah,
jump in
please.
with a couple of notes on how we are
Yeah,
collecting some of our analytics and sharing them back with partners
please.
on this course specifically, because I think that the point you made around how are you going to use that data, I think is something that we thought through very carefully. So as part of buying the course, something that our partners get with that is monthly reports on their learners' progress. And so those reports are comprised of 3 different data streams. So one, progressing through the course. So we're looking at things like, how many sittings does it take for folks to complete the course? What's the average time that they're spending? So are they doing this in 5 sittings where they're sitting for, a dead sort of 15 minutes between meetings and doing a lesson? Like, what does that look like in practice? The second data stream is around our quiz data. So at the end of the course, we have a comprehensive quiz. This is not a test per se. It's really just a moment for learners to reflect back on what it is that they've learned and maybe identify any opportunities where they may have missed some content that we consider to be critical within a lesson. And then the third data stream is our course evaluation. So we're capturing both quantitative and qualitative data there and sharing that back with our partners around, how do folks find this course valuable in terms of their role, their day-to-day work, interactions with their colleagues, most and least valuable parts of the course, and sort of overall impressions. And so in addition to sharing that back with our partners so that they can understand what their employees find valuable in this and sort of how they're utilizing it, we're also looking for points for refinement there as well. So for example, if we see everybody missing, the same quiz question, we need to go back and look at that. It may be that we didn't teach that material appropriately. It may be that the quiz question is worded oddly. But those are sort of some trends that we're looking for as well. And then just sort of other general points for refinement. I think that's something that we've talked a lot about with our partners, is that we're not giving them a static file for this course. The field of digital health is changing so rapidly that what they're doing is they're actually logging into our site, where we've built sort of our own LMS system to go through the course. And what that does is it allows us to update the course both regularly and sort of on a moment's notice. So for example, if there's a new regulatory guidance, it allows us to really go in there next day and make sure that our learners are getting the most up-to-date content there, as opposed to giving our partners a static file that then we have to, give them another static file and count on them to upload it and have no way of verifying that they've uploaded it. And, those sorts of things are a little bit out of our control. Here we've retained control for the purpose of making those updates, recognizing that the field is rapidly advancing. So I think there we're thinking about both the content side of things and the modality and tech side of things, and how those two really are working in tandem for this course specifically.
Yeah, and that's gorgeous. That's a huge benefit. I know that content modernization for legal is becoming near impossible, right? How do I keep my content up to date? And that is a major way to do that, by delivering that as an electronic file, and updating it, and the onus living with you. I'm sure many people on the call would agree that that makes it a lot better. And we talked about this earlier, and I mentioned a lot of these components are in what we talked about earlier, but information retention, a lot of this is one, a mix of education. We talk about most learning is not an event; it's more of a experience. And many times you need to access it multiple times. So for us, one of the big things that we're seeing is searchability becoming key to any major learning management system. And a core feature of any learning management system is, how do I get access to this information when I need it? Retention is also that. I think a lot of times we think, yeah, there is a lot of instructional design philosophy and science behind how we build courses, and that is your best defense against people losing that information. is making sure you don't have too much overload, spacing the learning out, but then also being able to get access to that information when they need it is really big. And so, like anything, this is an incredible time for change, and I think there's a ton of parallels in what we've seen in the pharma industry as a whole and what we're seeing in learning as a whole. We look at 94% of L&D professionals had a change in their strategy after COVID, right? Who would not? with 2 and 3 making significant changes forever, right? Not just a short time fix. And you have a ton of people as becoming digital, right? That is a really game changer. And I think one of the big things about, so how do we actually get there? I think it's about reimagining what we're delivering to our people. There was a knee-jerk reaction, just like we mentioned earlier, like the equivalent farm knee-jerk reaction of, okay, we need to do things digitally, so let's just start doing them digitally. Same exact thing happened for most of us learners, right? We have this course that's in classroom. Okay, boom, now it's virtual, right? And it wasn't necessarily not everybody. Some organizations did, not everybody had the time to actually sit down and think, okay, does this still capture the same instructional design principles and strategies of the classroom course, or did we just take the course and make it digital? And so strategy is becoming increasingly important in how you move from just a surviving of I took a classroom course and now it's online to what was it that we wanted to push forward in this program. And one of the big things that we're kind of, I guess, a buzzword, if you would, that we're starting to push out is creating a remote first learning strategy. There was a big talk about mobile first a while ago, and that kind of dropped down, I think, as people realized that there wasn't an enormous market there, but this idea of remote first learning and creating your learning and training programs with the idea you may never have access to this person, and creating strategies with that in mind is becoming ever important. And here's why, right? This is the reason why the change is there. Attention spans, too long, too boring, right? And that's the science of it. And how do we make it shorter to prevent cognitive load? And then again, there's just been so much more science around this as everybody shifted to digital. The great thing is that we were able to capture touch points. You just heard from Dime on just within their own content programs, how they're able to respond on demand and how we're able to keep that content on demand and change it. They talked about not just changing it based off of regulation, which I think a lot of us are more used to doing from a content perspective, but I think the key to what they was mentioned was based off of the engagement from the learner. And this idea of learner centricity, I think, is really what it all comes down to, and adjusting what we do based off of how people learn. I mean, that's been the name of our game forever, right? Our world is always changing. It's not like we've ever had a timeline where things have stayed the same or things have moved backwards. And I think from what we see, here there's a lot of ideas and a lot of steps on how to do it. But to summarize, this slide of how do I get from the stage of surviving, to thriving, it's, putting your learner at the center of your world is never a bad idea. And understanding how they're going to leverage your content and why they need to leverage their content, I think is really, really key. It really is the tide, I think, that raises lots of boats, is if you can help people understand, why do I need to invest my time in this program? What is the benefit for me? That really, really helps from what we have seen. And anything to add from Dime? I know that you know this very well.
Yeah, I'll hop in, and I'm certain Sarah will have some thoughts on this as well. But I think, the fundamental pieces here, and especially for the Pharma fundamentals course that we have, is there's a real intentionality around why we built this course. We want to support sort of members of the team across the enterprise in being successful change agents, in preparing their organization for successful digitization. And so if we don't put them at the center, what is it that we're actually doing? You absolutely cannot achieve that goal if you aren't considering attention spans and you aren't thinking practically. This isn't an academic exercise. They need to be able to go out and deploy these skills the next day. The best way to do that, and Sarah's education team just has phenomenal case examples and interactive tools throughout the course, from intentionally selected from different regulatory regions, different sorts of therapeutic areas, so everyone completes the course and feels like there was something in there that was uniquely for them. There's also the opportunity to add some bespoke content, right, for the organization itself, which I think is really, really important. And positioning people, if you're an enthusiastic learner, you're taking that enthusiasm through to the way you deploy this new knowledge and this new skill in practice. And ultimately, that's what we want to be happening in the workforce. So, Nolan, I think it's absolutely critical that you presented, I think, these caveats. And I was nodding along as I was listening. And I don't know if Sarah, if you have anything else you want to pile on there.
No, I don't think so. I think this attention spans thing though is very we hear this a lot. We sure do. And we hear it paired with, but they need all the content, but they have no attention span. So I think for us, we're trying to sort of figure out how you toe that line. Exactly sort of what this slide shows here, Nolan.
Yeah, and that's where I think, I've seen a video, I saw a video posted, and I've seen it throughout my life a couple times, where they have a video that's talking about they're trying to make a point on keeping learners' attention, and they take a child who has ADHD, and they show him learning how to do something through a video. And this kid is spinning in his chair, he's twiddling his thumbs, he's messing around with his pencil, he's throwing it in the air and catching it. He's doing pretty much everything there is except for watching this course on whatever it is. They took the same kid and they put on Empire Strikes Back, the Star Wars movie, and he sat still for the entire length of the movie to watch it. And so, I always think about that. I know a lot of times we say too long and cognitive load and things like that, and too boring. It's not always too long. I think sometimes, we jump to that, and we do hear. I think we hear it, but I also want to just throw that one caveat. I always think about that myself as well. As learners' seat time has shrunk considerably, I hope that we don't allow that pendulum to swing so far, that we don't allow ourselves to get into this world of I can learn everything I need to in an Instagram reel, where we actually do allow our learners to, indulge themselves if they want to, right? If it is of interest to them, give them the option to continually engage. And unfortunately, I said we'd get out early, which is okay. If we're not out early, then that means that we were able to provide a lot of value to the people on the call. So I appreciate everybody's time, and we're just at the top of the hour, which is perfect because we have just ended our slides. You can see there's contact information here for myself and for Dime Society, Jennifer and Sarah. I also put in there the contact information. You should see that in the chat panel. Contact that Dime Society. If you put the word education in the subject line, you can get more information about some of their coursework if you're learning to provide that for your team. And if anybody has any interest in more general, hey, maybe it doesn't have to do with this specific overview of pharma, but I do have interest. That's a field that Infopro Learning is quite well versed in, whether that's building marketing academies, sales training, compliance, whatever have you, we love to partner with you. And want to thank everyone for joining, and definitely want to thank our partners in this, Jennifer and Sarah, and the Dime Society as a whole, for kind of giving some of your time to educate us on where the industry is headed. It has been incredibly valuable.
Thank you so much for having us.
Of course. All right, everyone. Well, thank you again. We'll have this recording out to you hopefully early to middle of next week. Thank you again for joining, and we hope to see you all again on the next webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Nolan. Thanks, everyone.